I am who I am. I am here to uphold standards and win. And I think we will not be confused by that, but I'm here to look out for the best interests of the club and to win as much as we can.
Welcome to a brand new edition of the City Voice podcast. I always say these episodes are extra special, but this one is extra special because it feels like a bit of a page turner. I want to welcome to the podcast our brand new Sporting Director, Corey Wray. Corey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Great voice, by the way, for radio.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really
I appreciate that. Yeah. We've just been watching your latest press conference. We've been hearing the rumblings. Everyone in the building is really excited to have you in.
Great.
How has your first couple of days in St. Louis been?
A little bit of a blur. Trying my best to keep up with everything that we said we were trying to do. So far, so good. I am really fortunate, I think, to have a lot of understanding what these kind of changes look like in a club, and we can get into that later. But I've been really impressed just with kind of the openness and the kindness of everyone that I met so far.
Now, I don't want to read too much into symbolism here, but the sun has been shining very brightly since you came in the door. St. Louis is being kind to you. Have you managed to get out and about in town, or have you been stuck in the hotel?
Yeah, first and foremost, I don't know if you know my nickname, Ray of Sunshine. So there you go.
Yeah, wow, that's
actually
nice.
Not my nickname, but I'm sure
It would be
now
good if it
people
was.
will call it that. But I have not been able to go to too many places other than here and the hotel. I did go on a little bit of a neighborhood tour just to get a feel, but other than that, when I come back, I'll be looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Okay, so the podcast will take the shape. We want to talk about growing up and where you grew up, what the soccer culture was like there. Then want to get into some of the interesting parts of your career, and then we want to talk about the job that is ahead. Sure. But first, I wanted to go through a few of your credentials. We got 3 MLS Cups, Supporters Shield, Executive of the Year for Next Pro Cup winner.
Sorry
Against
about that.
Yeah, I remember that. That was my first heartbreak
Great season.
here.
Congrats. Yeah.
7 Canadian championships. You like to win. I think that is a pretty clear thing that comes through in your resume. Like, how important is that to your being?
Yeah, I think it's a product of what you do behind the scenes. And so it definitely represents the work that we put into it. I think we always had a funny phrase with the group in Toronto, and it's pretty simple. Winning is so much better than losing. And that goes for, the Monday when you come in after the weekend. Obviously, people going home to their families, and the kids are probably happy that you won. So it definitely is quite simply a great feeling. But most importantly, like I said, I think it's really, really, really an indicator of the work you're doing behind the scenes. To win once is hard. To win twice is pretty incredible, and 3 times is kind of unimaginable. So it goes to show that, all the great people I worked with and the processes that we did clearly worked. And I'm excited to not just take those and copy those here, but to kind of evolve those and apply it here in St. Louis to win here.
St. Louis folk love a backstory. You didn't grow up in America. You grew up in Canada. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and your introduction to soccer.
Yeah, so I was born in an igloo. Obviously, that was tough, but the first thing people will ask me is about igloos or all the typical Canadian things. But I was born in Toronto. I grew up in a suburb outside of it. As far as my life leading up to this moment there, it was great. Good supportive family. I will say not soccer fans, but yeah, really, really supportive of me and my love for the game, which started pretty early, and just something that I kind of picked up, and I've never stopped working or doing something in soccer since.
How did the soccer bug get you?
So I remember the '94 World Cup. I was actually in a very Canadian location, Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is in northern Ontario, at my grandparents' house where my father is born, and we would go there in the summer. And it was the first time I seen an event like that on TV and start to really, connect with, the players along the way. And I think that is where the bug kind of bit me, and it's ongoing. Believe me, it hasn't stopped.
So you graduate from university, Toronto FC is about to launch. How did you go about working your way into the setup there?
Yeah. So the program I was in was a sport management program, major at Brock University. It's in St. Catharines. It's very close to Niagara Falls. And the whole part of that program is in the fourth year, you're going to do an internship. At that time, imagine there is no Canadian teams in MLS, and generally soccer is not the most popular sport in Canada, and so in my mind, the opportunities to get into the game were quite limited, and so I started thinking about other ways to potentially find an internship in other sports. Fast forward a little bit, I think it was in my third year. 2005, they launched, the campaign that they purchased a franchise and that the team would be launching in 2007. Following the day that they announced they purchased the team, I called the main line and asked if there was a way I could work for the team. The lady was really kind and said, honey, we just named the team yesterday. Call back in a year or something. And so that was my first attempt. And then from that, I just kind of started to let people know my interest, and I had some great professors that connected me to secondary people in the organization, actually in the hockey side, and tried to find a way to put me in touch with them, who then put me in touch with the right people, and then I interviewed for the internship.
So quite a lot of tenacity from an early age to get in there.
Yeah.
How satisfying was it when you eventually got in the door, and did it marry up to expectations?
Yeah. Look, I didn't know what to expect. I just knew what I would be really happy working with, in terms of the game of soccer. I don't think I've ever been more nervous in my entire life than when I sat in the Union Station hallway in Toronto before my interview. I was shaking uncontrollably because I wanted it so bad. And so I think that the time from the interview until I found out was quite terrible waiting, but I was extremely happy to get in the door. And then, like I said, I had no idea what to expect. But I think a lot of people here can relate to what the startup of a franchise was. And I certainly was supposed to do one thing and ended up doing absolutely everything I could just to, make a good impression.
Startups are notoriously chaotic.
Yeah.
Do you think the chaos probably worked well for somebody breaking into the game because you have to wear many hats in a startup?
Yeah. And candidly, that chaos followed for a long time, and it did provide a lot of opportunity to learn, opportunity to try different things and to showcase yourself. When you do have stability, I think that can be stunted a bit. And so I think learning to thrive in that chaos was something that I learned at a very young age. And certainly to go through so many changes and still be a part of it was, looking back, something I was very fortunate to have happened to me for sure.
Who were your early mentors?
Yeah, so I received a baptism by fire. My first real mentor on the sporting side was Mo Johnston. Mo was a legendary soccer player, for those who don't know. Played for Celtic and Rangers. I don't have to go into that. We can have another podcast about that, probably with people more knowledgeable. But he was, in that sense, seen as a difficult character on the field, a real fun guy off the field. And he was the team's first head coach. And he transitioned into the general manager job as I became a full-time member of staff there. And he was really my first real boss, to put it that way, on the soccer side.
What did you learn from working with somebody like that, with all that experience in the game?
Yeah, I again, that could be another podcast, but I learned a lot. I had a real difficult time at first understanding the pace in which he worked. I think one of the things that stuck with me for many years is his ability to pick up information from many different sources to make decisions. He was famously nicknamed Trader Mo, and often that got us into a problem over the years and losing players we maybe should have kept. But he was so in tune with the inner workings workings of the league and the players, and he knew everyone. And it taught me a real good lesson about keeping a really strong network, and how to, exploit that for your benefit, for sure.
In sort of 2006, the sporting director was not as established as it is now. Like Premier League managers like Arsene Wenger ran the whole show. Sir Alex Ferguson managed the whole show. Was there a sense that when you were going through it, it's a bit more of an American, Canadian invention? Was there a sense that that he was learning as he went and you were helping to sort of build out what that role was?
Yeah, frankly, it has not been so defined until more recently. You even see the emergence of it overseas. Clubs often just put, former pros in the role, and because they were either the coach before, they understand how to manage a coach, and because they're a player, they'd understand how to manage a player. And certainly I understand that, idea, but when you think about managing, you're talking about other skills that are required as well. And that is always where the opportunity was for someone like me to help kind of refine some of his processes, to help guide him as it pertained to working in a larger organization, and just try to help keep, all the wheels, I guess, train on the track, wheels on the track, whatever that is, in terms of analogy, to make sure things didn't fall outside of his kind of day-to-day responsibilities. So I found that opportunity just by being someone who was curious and, somewhat organized. And I found a real good opportunity to then download and listen to his side of things. And like I said, I worked pretty closely with him for about 4+ years. Like, there was a lot of opportunity to learn about his views and his stories and meet a lot of really interesting people. But I think most importantly for me was how to create a relationship with someone like that. It's not easy. And I think that was definitely something that I learned over time how to, I guess, not perfect, but to do well at. And that's something to this day that's very important to me, is the relationship with the people you work with.
In those early years, would you try and find opportunity in the areas where people lacked to thrive? Like in those sort of formative years, like, is that something that you would look for?
Yeah, I wish it was like super strategic. Sometimes, as you know, in startups, it's just out of necessity. And then it's like, oh, hey, that guy's good at this, or hey, he seems like he knows how to, do that. And so I think I would just be very open to doing anything. And I think that meant, every day I was able to get lunch, the same order. And he, I knew that every day the coffee runs were the same. You start with the typical, low-level employee things that you hear about. And then it's like, okay, call the league and let's talk about our cap, or like, where are we at with, the trade agreement? And then you start to add on all these things. And next thing you know, you have like a huge amount of, helpful skills for whatever opportunity is next.
So you worked your way up through Toronto FC. How different was the league back then? It feels like there's been a very fast jump in quality over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. What was it like back then? What were the main differences?
Yeah, and so one of the main roles that I was doing was, managing the team and the day-to-day operations. And so as far as the quality of travel and hotels and everything, that has significantly changed very quickly. My first preseason was at a Holiday Inn Express with the team in Bradenton, Florida. I mean, it's no offense. Hopefully they're not a partner, but back then, their standards maybe weren't as high as they are now, but the rooms were kind of damp and dingy, and we spent a lot of time at these places. The food was as bad as you can imagine. We were bringing trialists in, and we have one treadmill for them to do testing on. Like, it was exactly where the league was at the time, and for a lot of fans of St. Louis who are just catching on now, it was not easy. We were commercial flights, we were connecting, bags were being lost. There was not a lot of expertise in any of the things going on the players' side when it comes to support for families. And so we were doing our best. And I have to give a shout out to the original MLS guys back in, 96 and in those days, who have worked with a lot of them since. That was even better what we were going through than what they went through. And so that's a credit to the league and obviously the vision of the entire group there that we've been able to simply in the past 20 years evolve from what I explained to the facilities that you see here, the stadiums, the fan bases, the way we travel, just the commitment to professionalism is, I could never have imagined we'd be in this place this quickly. And I say this quickly, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it's not typically a lot for all these changes to happen. And so it's been obviously credit to all the ownership for seeing the opportunity to improve that.
So Toronto, you get the assistant GM role. Was that putting a title on something that you were already doing, or was that a shift up, new responsibilities?
Yeah, depends who you ask. I was certainly already doing that, but it was a pretty important kind of shift for me in where I wanted to go. And like I said, I've been handling a lot of the team side, double duty for many years. I've been, prior to that on multiple scouting trips, doing everything that job would maybe indicate. And I've been doing that for a long time. And so I felt like it was important to recognize the work that I was doing. And it was a good discussion to get to that place of what I needed to do to be recognized as that. And certainly it was a really, really happy moment for me and also my wife when that did happen. It was a really great day.
You just mentioned scouting. What were some of the scouting achievements during that time that you were most proud of?
Yeah, of course. Like there's the big ticket, the DPs. I think, some of the stories behind that are probably pretty documented, but I was really clearly proud of the Sebastian Giovinco process and then some of the things that you learn along the way when it comes to right place, right time, or just, being at least available. And so, in that process, it was, let's go find a big time DP. Let's find someone who's going to get the fans off their feet. And so simply, you do all the regular things. You have your list, your scouting, we have all that. Now, maybe people don't know, but the Italian market in Toronto is quite large. And so, of course, we're not trying to just pick a player because of where they're from. But when you get an opportunity to get a player that can represent a large portion of the soccer fan base and also, get bums in the seats, you're in a pretty good place. And so we had identified about 4 or 5 different players. He was very high on the list. But back then, again, talk about development, it's not so easy to just get a hold of Sebastian Giovinco, right? Are you available? What does it look like? Are you really coming out of contract? And so that process to do that, I played a really, really important role in that. Not only putting him on the list, getting through the identification process, that stuff, but I went to a conference with our head of scouting, and, at these conferences, they're very much like all day. You meet people like, almost like speed dating with agents and clubs. It's long. You do run out of a voice by the end of it. And typical me, I say, we're not leaving until the day is over. We're going to meet everybody we have on our list. Like, we came over here. It's important. Fire alarm goes off. We go outside. Almost everyone else says, I'm calling it a day. This is a sign. This day's too long. I say, no, we're going back. We go back, got a huge lineup. Day is wrapping up. And there's a figure in the background, like I don't want to be rude, but he kind of looks like Gene Simmons, like a really eccentric looking guy. And I'm like, I can't wait to see what this guy's going to say. You just never know. He sits down, Italian fellow. He said, I have a player for you. I say, okay, who's the player? He writes it on a piece of paper. He puts it over. It's Aquilani. I said, look, like we have Michael Bradley. We don't really, I think we're good there. He said, okay, I have one more player. And he's telling me, Google me, trust me, I represent these players. I'm like, that's not a good sign, but okay. And he puts down the name, he writes G-I-O. I'm telling you, I grabbed that paper. I'm like, you are kidding me. He says, no. I said, we have been trying to get a hold of you for about 3 weeks. I've spoken to every major agent. They all told us, like, it's never going to happen. And you come here. And he was like, it's written in the stars. And so him and I have this story. I kept the paper. I have it somewhere in my move. He always tells it. He's like a Hollywood movie. Like, he's an amazing guy, Andrea. And that was the moment I called Tim. I said, we got it. We got to move on this player. We need to do this quick. This is a huge opportunity. And Tim was like, whoa, slow down, slow down. I said, look, he needs you in Italy in the next like 3-4 days. Can you do it? And he said, yeah, I'm going to go over there. And then that story is pretty famous about how we closed the deal and everything like that. But it wasn't like that necessarily, so smooth. There was always bumps in the road. And just to close that famous story, I'm in the chief legal officer's room, and this Andrea guy, again, larger than life, great storyteller. Every time we see like Giovinco's going to sign with Monaco, Giovinco's going to say, no, don't worry, he's just shopping. No, don't worry, you don't have anything to worry about. And we say, okay, we're about to be, given a real good lesson on who to trust here. And I'm in there, and we get the message, I'm sorry, the fax machine does not work. We say, oh, sure, okay. So here we go. The whole team is downstairs at an event. I'm waiting, and then he's like, I need to drive to the office depot of Italy, whatever that is. And so, okay, whatever, we're not getting this player. And then sure enough, the papers start coming through, and me and Peter Miller, the chief legal, are high-fiving. We bring it down, the whole like staff erupts. And then honestly, MVP, rest is history, first playoffs. One of the greatest players brought, at the time in their prime to MLS is something that, changed, I think, the face of the league, and clearly, in addition to Michael and Josie, our fortunes as a club.
That's good. A question on those types of players. You're obviously very excited about the player. You're tracking them down, and there's a star power that can maybe overpower reason.
Yes.
How do you read desire on players like that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they come over and they don't want to run, or they think it's the worst of MLS. Like, how did you know? What feeling did you get?
I think that is a really important point when you're talking about fit, right? And so the other story we have is we recruited Jermaine Defoe, and that did not work out. And that was, to a lot of us, a good learning. I mean, Jermaine Defoe, I don't have to explain his credentials, maybe from the wrong side of London, but we can get into that later. But a very, very, very good player, excellent at what he did over the years, national team and beyond. But we sold the project too much. And that was maybe the learning that we took from that. And I'm talking sold it. Like, you will never see a recruitment like that in your life. We were very proud of it as a group, but I don't believe you should need to do that when you find the right player. And so the difference of that, and I'm talking, my wife who worked with me at the time was basically trying to get an okay from Jermaine's mom for about a week. We're talking like going to the spa, tours, everything like that, before we got the okay to get to the next level. And then at the next level, we have Drake calling his sister. We have locker rooms full of jerseys every time the mom or family member goes in at a Leafs game, Raptors game. Like, we did everything. Then Giovinco, Tim shows up, like I said, to close the deal. He's dressed normally. Giovinco said, I like this guy. He looks not too serious. Let's go. Like, that tells you the commitment at times of what people are really looking for in a project. And it's not to say Jermaine was difficult or anything, but the fit just didn't make sense long-term for us and him. And I think that, to me, taught us a great lesson about getting people that want to be at your club and how important that is for the project.
Is the cultural fit with the Giovinco stronger because of who lives in Toronto? Does that help?
We thought so, but often you find that can often put a burden on these players where, in fact, they just want to be anonymous, right? And I go back to, we had Torsten Frings on the team. He's back in the day, like a German legend, all these things. And I asked him sometimes, like, Torsten, what'd you do today? And he said, I walked from my house to the Eaton Center, which is, probably 20 blocks. And then I walked back. And I said, oh, that's not much fun. And he said, that was the greatest day of my life. Nobody bothered me at all. And I think that is what MLS can provide to a certain extent. And so I think for Sebastian, the project, the ability to be the star was not always there for him in his career, even though he felt like he could be. And that linked up with what he wanted. And obviously, Andrea, his agent, had this idea. He tells me that he was thinking of it for years. So, put that together and you have a real good success.
So next up is another new project that has a lot of similar threads to the one you've just left.
Yeah.
What attracted you to that project? Were you kind of startup mode, like you enjoyed it, you wanted to go again because it's
Yeah, I sure we'll like end this and be like, oh, what are the themes? Like, I love to build. I think
Yeah.
that is super important to fulfilling me as a person. And that was a huge build. I mean, the history of the club is everyone knows that. They were about to leave, and new ownership, Haslam Group, Dr. Pete, and then the fans saved the team. And so, with that, with not knowing what was going to happen, a lot of people left. And so, when you talk about an expansion team, in some sense, you have nothing. We used to say like it's an expansion team, but with a deep history. And so we had to build everything from the ground up. Tim was there a year before, to get the lay of the land and try to figure out what that looks like. And after about a year, he called, myself and my wife to help boost the leadership team and have people who know what it takes to create a good club. And, we were on board pretty quickly. I think it was a really exciting opportunity to do that. You mix in the new facilities, the stadium, like it's unique that you get to do something like that more than once. And so we jumped on that.
And did you find that you got to the right decisions quicker the second time round? Were you a little bit more battle hardened, or was it a completely different rebuild? Or build?
Yeah,
sorry.
these are first world problems, but in our first year we won, and it was a very unique year with COVID and the bubble and all that. But that was quite funny because we had this plan that in a few years we're going to start competing quite consistently to win all the trophies, and so we won right away. And there's a lot of great things that happen with that. But as far as the heavy lifting, it was still to be done. And so we needed to find a way to, temper expectations a little bit and still provide the idea that we were not really achieving our plan until another couple of years. And so we worked through that, and clearly the work needs to be done as we missed the playoffs the next 2 years. But that allowed us to really get the things right behind the scenes that were required to set the team up now for the team you have seen probably in the finals, Leagues Cup, Champions League, and MLS Cup over the last few years.
You mentioned Tim Bezbatchenko, obviously doing great things in the Premier League at the moment, a big influence on your career. Could you talk to me a little bit about that relationship and how that formed and where it is now?
Yeah. So when he came to Toronto FC, we were both pretty aligned that look, we can run a team better. You talk about kind of the previous styles or the history of what the sporting department looked like. And often it was, not so deep in terms of planning, not a lot of strategy. You just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. You get it right, you don't get it right. And Tim came from a legal background. He's a MLS rule wizard. The two people that wrote, or at least instilled some of the laws that are in today for MLS world, cap rules and all that, are Tim and Ali. And Tim was always very smart to figure out how we could maximize our opportunities within that. And I think that was really important for me to understand. And he was someone who really pushed the envelope of what we thought we could do. And, he was also someone not afraid to really go for it when we thought the opportunity was right. And I think that culture shift was important for the club. So, I mean, I've known him for a very long time now, but he's someone that, for myself, I consider a friend now, very proud of the things he's doing now with the Black Knight Football Group. But most importantly, someone who really pushed me to become better every day. And I think that is what you need in a leader, in a caring way.
You said when you were at Toronto, bringing players in their prime was a point of pride. Is it a point of pride when you see somebody that's mentored you, that's worked closely with you, going to work with clubs like Bournemouth and seeing them doing really well, being a massive threat to top teams? Does that make you proud?
Definitely proud, not surprised. I mean, again, it's someone who I know will work extremely hard to make sure things are right. Someone who's going to take time also, if things are already going right, to let it breathe and not just come in and change things. So from that sense, you have a really smart leader. And I think what they're looking for is the next level of how do we make all our clubs work together. And that's a person who for sure is going to find the best way to do that. But again, all the hard work and everything is one thing. He's just a tremendous human being as well, and has a great family and someone that be able to rely on probably for the rest of my life.
You mentioned Ali in your press conference. Give us a little bit of detail about that. Like, what does?
Yeah. So the two people that we would call in the league on the other end were Ali and Tim, and so they were the club representatives for probably each half of the league, and so that's how the league was centralized and how they managed each team. So obviously, working with Tim, you learn a lot about the league, and then to have Ali come in was really interesting for me. One, because I didn't know him that well. But two, to get a different perspective on how to build and recruit and scout was quite illuminating on my side. And I think as mentors go, Ali is someone who deeply cares about the person and the progress. And so, yes, I worked with him for 1 year, and you're like, well, how does he make an impact? This is a guy who's followed up and supported me since then, as much as you can imagine someone could do, for no benefit other than just being a really nice person and making sure that I'm okay. And that goes a long way for me, because this is a business that doesn't always have people like that. And it's not lost on me that he's always there to support and advocate for. And I'm truly appreciative of that on my end.
Talk to me about your experience with, or actually, I'd quite like to get your view of Next Pro in general. Kind of a new thing. City was part of the sort of inaugural rollout of that.
Yep.
What's your view of Next Pro in general? And then tell me a little bit about what your role was with the crew there.
Yeah, obviously, I think I owe a lot of this opportunity to my success in Next Pro, at least in terms of having people know who you are, what you're doing. But as far as a product, it's vital. We need our players, especially developing players, to be given the most opportunities possible in a good environment, and that ticks that box. I think what is unique is that every team is going to run it differently and can, depending on what they're looking to do from an entire club setup. And so, what the plan and strategy was in Columbus is not necessarily going to be the same, in Huntsville or in, all the other teams, especially here. We'll look at it and assess it and try to figure that out. But what I will say, it allows me to be quite flexible with some of the things we're doing on the roster, giving players a little bit more time before maybe you need to give a contract, or it allows you to quickly see who's ready for the next level and use that internal pathway as something of a benefit. So I love it. Obviously, I'm thankful for it. I think they're doing a great job bringing in the independent teams. And I'm looking forward to getting to really understand this project here, but it's a very successful one, as we spoke about. I'm sorry about the final, but you can see that there's a desire to do well, and most importantly, I've been blown away by the fan support here. This is really something that a lot of teams say can be missing at times when you're talking about the development, but the ability for players to play in front of fans, to hear them cheer you on or boo you. I don't know how mean people are, but
they're not
give
mean
them
here.
that pressure is really important for a young player. And so that is what this group has done a great job at.
You've mentioned a few times, spoken to you in person and watched your press conference earlier, that there are different opportunities over the next couple of months about where you can recruit players from. Recruiting for MLS Next Pro, you get to look into a lot of very interesting places. You get to travel. There's not the same sort of access to video. Do you enjoy the scouting side of things, and does it give you a kick when you find a player in a very random place? Is that part of your DNA as a sporting director?
Yeah, I always want to be ahead of the next kind of competitor, right? So of course we can always go to the same markets, and then you're competing, together, and that's not always ideal. I think the idea when we did the second team in Columbus was to test those theories. Not surprisingly, I was successful in pulling, from the Canadian Premier League and my knowledge of what that looks like. I was able to pull some players, from USL League One and the championship and try to build a team as best as I could with balance, in addition to the NCAA and all the other standard mechanisms. But I love that stuff, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to unearth the next talent and provide an opportunity. But I don't love it for me. I love it for the messages I get after when a Mo Farsi, who was a futsal player, who then was out of contract in Canada, gets selected by the Algerian national team to be in World Cup qualifying. That blows my mind. And he says, "Thank you. I could never have done this without you." I said, "Thank you. We wouldn't have the success without you believing in the project." And that gives me goosebumps. That is, all I could ever ask for. And that's one example. I'm sure you guys can find a few, but there's so many players that are so grateful for the opportunity, and that's all I can really provide. The rest is up to them, and I'm really proud of that list of players. There's a long list now that have come from what seems to be nowhere and now are doing really great things. That's what it's all about, I think.
Fans will be excited to hear that. Okay, you've landed in St. Louis. You're the new sporting director. We've seen words like progressive, modern, holistic. Could you explain to the fans what sort of sporting director you're going to be?
Yeah, I think it's a deep question. So first of all, I am who I am, right? I'm not going to pretend to be someone else because that's what the role should be, or look like, or have preconceived notions. I'm very, very honest. I'm caring. I am also extremely competitive. I am someone with a deep drive to do well in anything I do. And so that's what the fans can expect from me, but I am who I am. And I think that has been really assuring in this process, to have the commitment from ownership to be myself, to lead in my unique way, which is maybe to some people not so typical of the position. But do not get me wrong, I am not here for charity or to just be nice to people. I am here to uphold standards and win. And I think we will not be confused by that, but I will do it in the nicest possible way I can. But I'm here to look out for the best interests of the club and to win as much as we can. And so I heard the expression recently about an iron fist with a velvet glove. And I think that's what you'll get from me. I'm very determined in making sure we're successful, but you're not going to feel those ups and downs if we lose a game or something like that. I need to keep calm to make rational decisions. You'll get that 100% of the time.
There's a balance of art and science in soccer. I've heard you talk about structure and the importance of it. You've seen a number of structures through your 20 years working in the game. How important is getting the structure right, and how do you evolve structure with like a very fast moving game?
Yeah, so from a high level, you just want to make sure that all the departments are working together, right? If you have that going, and that's easy stuff like communication channels, meetings, follow-ups, very basic business principles. If you can get that right, which is easier said than done in sports, you're in the first stage of probably doing well. Then you talk about like, are we being as efficient as possible? You start to look at some of the underlying things that are going on in the club. And I think that is the next level of excellence, that once you achieve a certain, portion of success with the club, you start to look at first world kind of problems, right? So we need to get to that before we kind of go to the next step. And I'm pretty mindful of that. So I think there's a lot of, fairly basic things that we can do to get people, going in the same direction. I think there's a few easy things we can do to make sure that we're operating from a sporting side at a baseline level that is aligned with our competition, at least. And then you start to fine tune those additional areas, more resources needed, things like that, once you get to the point where you feel like you can't progress anymore. So I think, over the next, year or so, it'll be about making sure we get everything to at least a baseline so that we're ready to elevate into the next kind of phase of this club's growth.
Data and analytics is always a hot topic in sport and soccer in particular. But what's your view on where data is nowadays, and how important is it to your structures and the way that you want to operate?
Yeah, first of all, it is part of the process. I think, as someone with glasses and the way I look, it might be characterized as someone who's only going to use data or who believes in it like extremely heavily. I think the balance is really important. And then I think what each department can learn from each other when using data and talking to the people who are utilizing and looking at things is where the growth comes from. So in an ideal world, our scouts and the traditional way of looking at things is aligned with what the data is saying. And now you have a really strong process. But that takes time, that takes meetings, that takes maybe some people yelling at each other. Everybody's going to say what they do is best. And I sit in the middle of that and try to translate that to make the best decision. So it is 100% going to be part of the process. We are going to utilize it in the best ways to save time on some people's tasks. We're going to use it to automate some processes so we can have deeper conversations. But it will not be the be all and end all here, but we will utilize it to the best of our ability to make better decisions.
The academy has been sort of set up from the ground up. How excited are you about getting stuck into that side of things? And what's your role in like tweaking how you do things there?
Yeah, I think that is a longer term kind of plan for me. We're going to do a lot quickly over the next little bit to get the first team roster set and organized. And obviously the trickle down from that will change some things on the second team and underneath. You know, just in my conversations with the group and the staff, you know, the difficult thing about the academy is the cycles of player development. So something that we do today could affect that pool 4 to 5 years from now. And so what I think we are at right now with the evolution of the academy and what's exciting is they've gone through one cycle and we can really go and deep dive the things that worked and didn't and start to adjust that next phase. So what you're seeing now as players coming through the first team or second team is the work that the group and the academy staff did 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so that is really hard for some people to imagine doing something and then waiting 5 years to see if it works. But that is development. And sometimes it's longer than that. And so I'm excited for their deep dive into what worked. I'm excited to hear what we can adjust. And I'm really here to support them and provide as much of a pathway for those players as possible, because it is very important we have players from here in our first team.
There's you're part of a new generation of like sport executives that have sort of come up through the ranks without having a playing career. Mm-hmm. How important is your background? Like, how do you explain to players that you're working with when you don't have a sporting background? Is it an impediment, or is the footballing world just more accepting of those sorts of roles nowadays?
Yeah, look, I'm not a coach, right? But I can speak to a person and connect on a human level. And I think that's very important when forming relationships. Often, you know, you do create those relationships talking about the game, but it's never been a question or anything that's come up like, wait a minute, you know, this guy, he never kicked the ball. I don't know if I can trust him right now. I find it actually the opposite. You know, what's your perspective? How did you see that? People are very open when you come from a communication level that's respectful. And then also when you create relationships, they come from also a place of trust. And I think that's benefited me over the years. Because I didn't play at a high level, I'm sure there's things missing deep down in my analysis. But I would challenge anyone to meet someone who's worked with as many people who've played at a high level as me. And those conversations about the game, the job, many nights, you know, with coaches, being someone that they can speak to openly, has given me a real insight into, I think, what it takes to be successful on the player side and also on the coaching side.
You've worked in winning cultures your whole career. What are the key ingredients for you when you're rebuilding a culture here?
Yeah, I think I just need to correct you. I've also been in some pretty bad cultures as well. And I think, you know, knowing the difference between both actually really benefits, you know, the winning side. And so we made a lot of mistakes in the early years of TFC. We struggled with a lot of the things that, you know, I believe are important for success, you know, stability, you know, real processes, you know, communication between departments, things we spoke about. You know, in the early years of losing, and, you know, at one point, one of the players had a headline in the newspaper. We were the worst team in the world. And I think that got picked up, and that was, a tough time for the group. But you learn so much from those moments to be able to take it to the winning side. And actually, winning actually covers up a lot of the cracks in an organization. And so, you probably know this, but believe it or not, when you're losing, you learn so much more about the group, the people, the culture. And that can be undone pretty quickly if you have it wrong, because you lose 3 or 4 games and you find yourself in a pretty tough situation if it's not right. If you lose with a good group of people, which we're going to try to build here, there's no panic, there's no finger pointing, there's a commitment to get better, and everybody knows that everybody's trying to do that with their jobs. And I think that is really important for a winning culture.
During your sort of turnaround roles, has there ever been a moment where you've been working really hard on like cultural principles and making sure everybody understands the mission, the vision, where something's happened and you're like, the culture's here? This is like, we've got it right here. That moment sort of signifies something important, like a shift.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of those. The one that comes to mind was in Toronto. I mean, we had worked so hard to get a playoff appearance. We were bounced right away. It was one of the moments that was really tough for us because there's so much expectation. We lose to our rivals, we're out. And then so the following year, work so hard, get to the finals, and unfortunately lose a game where the other team doesn't have a shot on goal. You talk about that and what it could do to you and the group. It's very difficult to digest because you feel like you've done everything you can to win and you don't. And so the game can be cruel like that. Where it became very clear is how quickly the group, the leadership of the team, the players, the staff were ready to lock in for 2017. And that commitment, fire, determination you could smell it. Like, it was so motivating. There was such a committed goal from that team to get back to the finals and win that, the rest is history. The treble, winning everything you could with that team, being now named one of the best teams of all time in terms of what that looked like. I could smell that a mile away, and that is the hunger and desire that I hope one day we can have here for a championship.
So let's talk a little bit about St. Louis City. We've read them, we've heard the press conference. You really wanted this job. What drew you to the job? Is it that what's the opportunity for you when you were looking at this role?
Yeah, look, this day 2.5 or 3, whatever it is, I think what I thought as an outsider may change, but who knows? But I'm extremely bullish for the obvious reasons. Okay, best in class facilities. You have great ambition from the ownership. You have a group of people by my estimation now in a few days that are really committed to doing well and want to win. And it's only 3 years old, right? So you have a team that is ready for the next cycle and step. And I think for me, that goes back into the things I talked about in terms of a build. We have a big opportunity now, not just tomorrow to change things, but to really build something in this next phase. And that is, as I mentioned, something that really motivates me.
You have been here a short time,
yes.
But I am going to ask you for some like hot takes about what you feel about like the squad, the people that you've met so far. You said you're bullish. You give off like a real aura of confidence.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think you have to have people that want to change, right? And again, it's early, but there's no indication that there's a set way of doing things. There's no indication that, people are worried about maybe doing things a little bit differently because, like I said, there is from top to bottom, the organization seems clear. Like, we want to do really well. And that is, pressure that is probably needed in the group to know that this is something that we would like to do as quickly as possible. So hot take, very excited about the people that I'll be working with and the opportunity there to help them develop and to grow into their roles. Other hot take, let's see, facilities are amazing. I already knew that, but that's not so much of a hot take. Weather's been great. Don't know if that's forever, but that's yeah. I think the weather here is great. And then outside of that,
bad times are coming, my friend.
Well, you were talking to someone from Canada, and
oh yeah,
and
no,
so
Andrew, you'll be
good.
fine.
Yeah, yeah,
You'll be fine.
So I think that traffic's been good. It's been easy to get to work. But most importantly, like I am just really, really excited about seeing the fans in person. I think that you can only see as someone watching on TV. I'd mentioned I've experienced the game for the U.S. team, so I think that this should be a tremendous source of pride for the staff, is to be able to perform, and to have the players perform for those fans. I think you couldn't ask for a better place to play, and I think that's a really exciting piece for me, especially coming here.
How important, is a packed stadium, but one of the noisiest in MLS? Like, how much does that help you when you're trying to sell the club to bring players in?
Yeah, it's very important. Players have egos. They want to be loved. They want to be cheered on. I mean, who doesn't, right? So imagine, stepping out to that and it's crickets. I mean, I think the advantages we can grow in creating that stadium and making sure we're performing to the best of our abilities, winning games at home is going to be important. But for recruitment, I mean, there's nothing better than showing the atmosphere, the facilities. Like I said, there's really no excuses here for us when it comes to recruitment. And I mean that. And I'm super excited to kind of dive in more the details of the rest of the city and what it has on kind of display for me and my family. But when I'm thinking about my job and my role, and I'm thinking about the video or whatever we're going to produce to get someone to sign here, kudos to everybody that's put this together, because there is a great foundation for me to work off of, and that's not always the case either. So I don't have to worry about that. That sometimes people have to worry about that, but I don't, and I'm thankful and grateful for that.
There's a lot of gaps in the squad. Some might look at that and say that is a daunting challenge. Mm-hmm. How confident are you that you can get the pieces, the foundational pieces you need to sort of hit phase one of the project for the start of next year?
Yeah, I'm always going to be confident. I think there's a lot of things that are going to be out of my control, in our control as a sporting group. So, I think we might take decisions that are going to help us in the short term. We might take, decisions that will help us in the longer term after we get things set up. I think most importantly is that when we take decisions, we have the right process. And so that is really what I'm going to be focusing on. I have, a few days, I think, to digest everything, and we'll be focusing on that ASAP. Once we get that right, then we can start to move quickly. And I think that is a huge benefit of a clear process and kind of vision from my side, is to be able to make decisions quicker than your, competition, but with the right backing and information that's needed. So I think it's not always going to be a question of like signing a player and trying to understand what that's about, because the right player is not always available at the right time. And so it's my job to figure out what's going to be good for us quickly to be competitive as soon as possible. But then also we talk about that long-term vision of what we want from this club, linking all the different pathways, trying to hit on every single mechanism in MLS. That's going to take a little bit longer.
Diego mentioned building towards a sustainable model over the long term. Mm-hmm. What does a sustainable model mean?
Yeah, look, we definitely want to participate in the global transfer market. We want players coming through our academy, second team, first team, and seeing them sold on to big teams. Hopefully, maybe Bournemouth wants to buy a player down the road, something like that. I think that is great for us. That's great for the players in our group. And I think that's what every player wants to do, is to move on at some point to the best place for them to challenge themselves. So being sustainable in that sense, that makes sense. That also helps me when it comes to recruitment. That also helps me with acquiring assets within the league, the GAM, options to rebuild if we're doing well. We know that's difficult. You need to be prepared for, what the league is, which is a league of parity, and it actually works against you when you're doing well. And so those are the opportunities to be sustainable through sales and potential cash for trade deals, things like that. And then the decision making and processes I'm talking about to kind of be a well-oiled machine, and we need to be good at all of that.
What's your view on playing style Do you have one? Do you match the playing style to the group of players you've got? Do you hire coaches with a view? Like how does it work for you?
Yeah, I think the things you mentioned are all important to defining that, but that for me starts at the top. We talk about what the vision in terms of how this club fits into the market, what the vision of ownership is. We start there from a very high level. Like, these questions are really going to be determined by them. Then that will get down to, Diego, myself, and then the larger leadership group to make that a little bit clearer as it pertains to what our day-to-day decisions look like. And then the decisions on how the coach wants to play and how the players should look will fit into that. And I think that is where the differences of a club-led model or a manager-led model will be pretty apparent. And that will be part of the process, that someone, fits into that identity of what the club is looking for at a high level. And then on the sporting side, we're going to support that with the right profiles. So hopefully, that's something we'll be able to really, define. I know there's already a lot behind that that's been done, but let's get that clear. Let's communicate that. And then that helps me move forward very quickly with how we need to be, because you're not thinking, well, what if this guy or that guy? You say, look, that's a good player or that's a good coach, but he's not for us. And I think that is so helpful when recruiting and hiring. And I think that will lead the way from now until the future.
I appreciate there's a coaching process going on at the moment, so I don't want to dig too deeply into that, but through your experiences, what ingredients make a great coach?
Yeah, I think there's tons, right? And you think about all the things that a head coach has to do. It's almost ridiculous, the amount of pressure we put on one person to do all these things. And so I think if we keep it very simple at first, and I mentioned it today, we need to work with good people across every department. And so that includes the head coach. So the character, the quality, do they do what they say they are supposed to do? Are they, great people for the community? I think we're going to start there, because this is a person that is going to be, hopefully the face of the organization in many ways, a person who's going to have many people looking up to them for how to act and what to do. And I think you need to be someone with really, really strong character to lead that. That's my opinion, but we'll start there. If you're not the coach for us. We get into the next thing, the club-led model. I think that is going to be important to see where the coach fits in on that. There's many good coaches out there that need it to be my way or the highway. I respect that. It's a results business. They can't wait for people to figure things out. We have to win tomorrow or I'm out of a job. Completely get that. But we will be looking at a club-led model where someone fits into all the important values we have as an organization, and also into how I want to run the day-to-day with the rest of the leadership group. So if they can buy into that and speak the same language and understand that, that's going to be a real good benefit for them. And then we'll get into the tactical stuff, the motivational stuff, the management stuff. But I will say that a lot of times people overlook the fact that they also have a staff, right? And so if we can define roles clearer, understand who's accountable for what, we can then take some of the burden off the coach to have to know everything. And I think that will be interesting. Should there be any candidates that are lacking in a certain area, can we build them up with the support staff to make sure that there's no blind spots? And I feel like that gets overlooked sometimes, and that's something I'm excited to talk to the candidates about as well.
You mentioned sort of club values, ownership values. How important were those values when making a decision to come here? And do you take those values into how you think about the sort of coaches, the sort of players? Like, do you map them back to what goes on in this building?
I would like to. Most of the time they're transferable. I'm definitely getting in trouble. I can't recite them right now. I've seen them on the walls. It would be doing a disservice. I will learn them and we will incorporate them, because the connection between what we do in the front office and the business side and what we do on the field needs to be strong. I think a lot of the times, and I understand this, I've heard people yell at me on the phone when I was an intern. I understand how troubling it could be for people every day if they're not connected to the product. And so if we can live those values in some way or emulate them in terms of the playing style or some connection between the both, I think that would be fantastic. That is a real good sign of a really healthy organization.
And what can fans expect from you? We were doing research on you before. You're not in the media a lot. You kind of work behind the scenes, doing your photo shoot. You're not used to that sort of thing. Will you sort of talk fans through what's going on through the season, or like do you sort of step back? Like, what's your approach?
I'm definitely a big proponent of communicating, like, and being as transparent as possible. You know, that will dictate, I think, a lot of the buy-in that's required from the fans to give us the time to do what we need to do to make a winning team. So I'm going to be as available as humanly possible. I will do everything I can to convey the message to them, you know, through different avenues. I do enjoy the meet and greets, Q&As when needed, because I think it's important to meet with the people who are spending their hard-earned money to come see the team. So I am certainly someone who does not seek it out, but I am more than happy to create those relationships, and I'm very excited to understand what, you know, they want from the team, and hopefully I can deliver on that.
No, we did hear a rumor yesterday that you were introduced to toasted raviolis.
Yes.
What's the hot take there?
Yeah, hot take, they're really good. Definitely an enjoyer of toasted ravioli. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, a good mix of all the right ingredients. So yeah,
that's the
consider
right.
me a big fan.
PR over there, smiling, nodding his head. We've got a little tradition at the end of the show. You get to speak to the fans to say whatever you want to say. They're really excited to hear from you. What's the message to the fans?
Yeah, I can't wait. Honestly, I hope you're as excited as I am for the opportunity. I hope that you'll, you know, give me a chance to really get this team where it needs to be. And most importantly, I hope you understand from my end and my family how grateful we are to, you know, move to this city and be part of the culture. We are extremely excited as a family. We are extremely excited for my daughter, who's talking about all the things we've shown her, mostly just the Ferris wheel and the parks and the museums. But, you know, for me to have that is really the most important thing for me. So to the fans, don't worry about the work rate. Don't worry about how much I'm going to think about it. Don't worry about any of those things. I think just hopefully one day they don't get tired of winning, because that hopefully is coming their way.
Well, that takes us to the end of the podcast. I hope that everybody listening to that is excited and enjoyed the intensity of the conversation. Like, I'm excited sitting here. Welcome to St. Louis City. And if you are listening to this on your podcast platforms, give it a little 5-star review. And then hopefully Corey will come back later on in the season, maybe at the start of next season, to talk about the progress. And on that note, say ciao for now. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.